Hello there, and welcome to a new episode of the Talking Silkworm podcast, where you're going to learn how to create content for your brand easily and smoothly, stress free, because that's what we want to do. So, what I want us to think about today is what if your educational platform, if your educational brand had a podcast show? What will the benefits be if it doesn't already? Or if it does, so how you can capitalize on it to get more benefits. And I'm not talking about transactional benefits, I'm talking about community building benefits here. So the first thing is you're going to be able to connect with your audience. We want to build that connection with the audience, not just focus on, of course, sales are important, yes, but sales come after building the relationship. What I'm going to say applies to both large platforms and smaller platforms. So if you're just a small content creator, or if you run the marketing or the podcast production or the media production for a bigger company, it is going to work for you as well. Good. So like the good thing about these skills is that they are very scalable and they will operate in smaller shows and larger shows as well. Good. Let's check. Why launch a podcast? Like everybody's got one. Why should I do it? Well, if everybody's got one, is because there is some benefit to it. Like there is a lot of benefit to it actually. The first one is humanizing your brand. Sometimes, particularly if you're working around like a brand that is not a personal one, giving it that human touch is going to be super important. So that's going to be the first element of having a voice, an actual person's voice in your brand. That is going to also reflect in terms of building or establishing authority. Yeah, because you're going to be expanding on a lot of crucial topics for your audience. So they are going to recognize you as an authority, and you're going to build a community. This is essential. Yeah, connecting with other people, even if the brand changes or even if the type of services or product you offer change, because the market evolves, that community is going to be there with you. They are not going to go away, or most of them are going to stay, even if changes occur in the market or if changes occur within your own company or within your own offer or services. So that's going to be an essential part of it. Remember, podcasts are business assets. They're not just content, they are business assets. And these are some examples of why they are business assets. The other aspect of it is they engage clients or they engage learners and they engage listeners because they run for longer time than video does. They also have higher retention rate than video does. And because they are a company, podcasts, different from video, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, they operate as companies. So while people are driving or while they're doing like cleaning their house or doing other activities, they play the radio. They used to play the radio and now they listen to podcasts as a way of company. So you are going to be there in the intimacy of their space. You're going to be talking with them. Yeah, not necessarily talking to them, but talking with them in a certain way. So that's why it's so engaging to listen to a podcast and to connect with your audience through a podcast. What should this podcast look like? What should the content be? What should you talk about? Should you interview people? Should you do solo episodes? What should be in there? Well, it's actually a mixture. It's a combination of different elements. Each element will bring its own value to the audience. You can have tips. Yeah, maybe that you take from your courses. You can include tips. You can have industry insights if your podcast addresses a particular, if your content, if your educational platform addresses a particular industry. You're going to have expert interviews. This is so essential for building authority, like being able to sit down with an expert. And of course, the expert is going to do most of the talking, but if you can be at the same level with that expert by like asking great questions and by maybe like adding very important remarks or highlights to the answers they give, that is going to build up your authority a lot. And also you have like testimonials, stories of success, everything you can think of, or most of the things you can think of can be turned into content for podcasts. That means you can have interviews, you can have narration style podcasts, you can have monologues. All these formats can fit in there. Of course, it is going to be important to plan it out in advance and make sure like what format serves what purpose and provide each format on a specific date or day. So for example, if you're going to be publishing like 4 times per month or once per week, so like the first week of the month is going to be an interview, and then the second week is going to be a solo, and the third week is going to be like a testimonial or a success story or something like that. So the audience is prepared and they know what they're going to listen to. Okay, this is an ideal scenario. I understand sometimes materials are not going to be ready, so you can keep this cadence, but planning here is essential. If you have to change something for a different type of format, that's perfectly fine. This diversity of content, of voices, of perspectives is gonna both help drive more listener engagement and attention, and also display a lot more value in terms of what it is your platform offers and what is the knowledge and the values and the power you can bring to the person that is going to buy your services at some point. Let's talk about work, because creating content, in this case, specifically a podcast, it requires time and requires effort and requires attention. I think everything in a business does. And this is no different. It should not be any different from that. Again, as I mentioned, I'm going to say this multiple times today, and I'm going to say this multiple times across the different episodes. A podcast is a business asset. And if you invest time in building your asset, of course, that asset is going to pay off, is going to give you returns, not only in terms of money, of course, in terms of money, that's something we are looking for, but also in terms of engagement and brand recognition and authority and everything else. All right. So in order to do that, we need two things, which is actually one thing, is a consistency. Yeah, frequency, consistency, but it all boils down to consistency. We want to have a consistent schedule and stick to it. I know it's hard at the beginning. I know it's hard when you don't have the right processes. I know it's hard when you don't have the right team. But as you build up your processes, as you build up your team, it should become easier and easier. I recommend having a cadency of 1 episode per week. That's the perfect cadency. Some people, cadence. Sorry about that. Some people will publish 2 episodes per month. That's perfect. That's doable. If that's something you can start with, if that feels like what's manageable for you, do it. Do not over question yourself. Well, don't question yourself asking, is this the right thing? Is this going to be too little? It's the right thing if that's what you can manage. I think 2 episodes a month are great to start, to build out those systems, to build that rhythm, and to promote, because we want to use those 2 weeks of space, use that time window to promote the episode. Remember here, like this is not Instagram, or this is not TikTok, or this is not YouTube, where there is an algorithm promoting the content. Here, you need to make sure the content reaches people's ears. How are you going to do that? You can use, of course, the other channels I mentioned, social media. They are a way for promotion. You can use your email list. You can use LinkedIn. You can use other channels. But we want to actively use that time in between episodes to promote. Once you have mastered that, what I recommend is go up to 4 episodes a month. That is the most beneficial for audience growth. It's still in it, and it will still give you time for promoting each of the episodes. If you want to go twice a week, which I think sometimes a lot, you can do it if you have the right team and the right systems to manage that, because that is a lot of content. That is a lot of activity. That is a lot of things you have to do. I do have clients who go twice per week. So what they do is, like, the main episode of the week, it's something like they have recorded specifically for the podcast show. And what they publish the other day of the week is maybe a conference or a webinar or something that is getting repurposed, meaning that person is not recording 2 episodes per week. They are recording only 1, and they are repurposing other content they created somewhere else into podcast episodes. All right. So this is important, because the content you're going to be creating, like if you're doing a webinar or a conference or like a workshop or whatever or live streaming, the audience is going to be the same. The information is going to be valuable for the audience, so you can still repurpose that. But you do need help here. You need extra hands to make sure you can manage the volume of content that is getting published, and you can manage the volume of content that needs promoting. If you are not there yet, which is okay, like the number of clients I have to publish twice a week are very, very few. Go with 2 times per month, or like, yeah, 2 times per month for starting, and then move on to once a week if you feel comfortable with that. Because we want to keep that for a long period of time. We don't want to do that only like for 1-2 months. Like, we want to sustain this rhythm for months, even years, because that's how a podcast grow. It's a long-term game. Here are some challenges that you will need to face. And they're not necessarily big challenges, but things you need to be aware of and control your expectations, because sometimes, because we live in such a fast-paced world and everything is so fast-paced, like in algorithms just give you content that you process and consume in 5 seconds, and then you swipe up and a new piece of content comes up and everything is so fast. But everything is like, you forget so quick, because this content is not made to be remembered. This content is just to keep you hooked and distracted. Podcasts are content that are there to be remembered and to educate people and to inspire people. So you got to manage your expectations there. Yeah, we are not looking for virality. We are not looking for instant success, quote unquote success. We are looking for a way to build community and engage our audience. So challenges to expect. First one is keeping a consistent production rhythm, and publishing rhythm, keeping that consistency. I just mentioned, like, twice per month, once a week is going to be perfect. The other aspect is handling like knowledge gaps, technical knowledge gaps when it comes to, okay, how does a podcast work? What do I need? How do I get it published? How do I get it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts? And like, how does a microphone work? And then like, how do I get it recorded? How do I get all those elements? And they can easily be overcome by onboarding a podcast production team. Instantly overcome as soon as you have another person. Because as a business owner, let me give you a reminder, you're not supposed to do everything. You are supposed to do the thing you are best at and then delegate the rest. So making your voice heard, spreading the message, that's what you should be doing. Taking care of all the technicalities is something you should be delegating. This is another point. When you work with a company, inside a company, and you work with teams and you need other departments' approval, one of the challenges, this has nothing to do with the podcast, it has to do like kind of with work politics, is the resistance or skepticism. Yeah, skepticism from your director or from executives or from like other stakeholders in the business. Like, hey, is this going to give us what we want? Is this going to give us the ROI we're looking for? Is this going to give us like results or a huge audience overnight? Or, oh my God, the budget for this, like we are focusing our budget or something else, blah, blah, blah. So you will need to plan ahead and like do the talking and onboard these people onto the project before you actually get started. Yes, you understand, like sometimes projects need to be sold internally before they can be sold externally. So prepare yourself to do the talk and emphasize, and you got to manage those expectations. This is actually the next challenge here. Managing unrealistic expectations, either your own or your other team members or your stakeholders' expectations. People that might be looking for a quick success. Yeah, they want to have 100,000 downloads after the first month of launching the show. That is unrealistic. Yeah, the curve for a podcast is not as steep as for social media, but it lasts a lot longer. It runs for a lot longer. Virality, which is a word that has become a headache for people who help businesses create content, because I want to go viral. Yeah, but you're going to go viral for a while. Like, people are going to forget about you as soon as another viral piece of content pops up. And virality doesn't mean engagement. It doesn't mean like people are going to remember your brand or like people are going to buy from you or people are going to benefit from the knowledge you have to share. So that's a thing. Yeah. So far, like the biggest ones are like politics, work politics related, not technically related, because technically related challenges are easy to tackle, very easy to tackle. And budget constraints also. Budget constraints, even though podcasts are low costs to produce compared to other media, consistency and promotion requires resources. As I'm saying, it's even less as, for example, if you were producing a TV show style type of content for YouTube. It requires resources, and it requires like sustaining those resources for a long period of time. And you need budget for that. I'm not gonna lie, you need budget. It's not gonna be like I think of the multiple ways you can create media content for your company. The least budget demanding format is podcasting in a lot of ways. Yeah. Starting with the equipment, then with the software, and then with the distribution. It is the least demanding type of content in terms of budget required. Keep that in mind. If you're like, oh, but budget, we don't have budget. Yeah, but we either do this or we go with a more expensive thing that might not give us the results we want. So like this can give us the results we want with less budget. Okay, some of the aspects that can help you do the talk and overcome some of these work politics challenges you may encounter. The first one is that the content here is going to engage both ends of the production process. Is going to engage the audience, of course, but it's also going to engage the internal team. Why the internal team? Because you have experts in your team, because you have knowledge in your team, and because you have a lot of potential in your team that can be shared with the audience. Going back to the first point as I was mentioning, part of like both humanizing the brand and building that authority. A lot of that authority is already present inside your team. This will also help your team understand a little bit better what the company does, what other departments in the company do, yes, because a podcast is an overview of that. It is client facing, yes, but also it can help educate your own team in terms of like offers and services and knowledge and values you have. Showcasing leadership, yeah, as I mentioned. Inside your own company, you have leadership positions or leaders there that can share a wealth of knowledge. And executives also can be a part of it. Your CEO can be a part of it. The director of marketing can be a part of it. If you're the director of marketing, your voice can be in it. So like that is a chance for you to show leadership inside of your company and share that knowledge with the audience. Next point is community engagement. Podcasts build very loyal followings, and having those voices from your company into the listeners' ears are going to be important for building connections. It's going to be like a family. It's going to be like being part of a group that is working together, talking together, going to a goal. Yeah, moving towards a goal. And the other aspect I already mentioned is podcasts have a high ROI potential if we compare what they can bring in versus what they cost to produce. Please bear in mind, I am not talking about ROI in terms of money necessarily. I'm talking in terms of relationships, in terms of connections, because you can bring in as guests, you can bring in leads, you can bring in industry gatekeepers that you want to be in contact with. And there you have a podcast. Like one thing is asking them for a meeting, which they might say not to. But a different thing is asking them to be a guest on your show, which they might be very, very willing to do. So ROI is not just money. If the focus is only transactional, it's just dollars, we are going nowhere with this. We are going nowhere. We need to go beyond that. I mean, transaction is part of, it's not all of it. And business asset is going to keep bringing value even after months or years of publication. If you publish an episode today, if the content is evergreen, 2 years, 5 years from now, people are going to still listen to that. They're going to find value in that, and it's going to continue adding to the value, the perceived value your company has. It has a long tail. Whereas, for example, social media, once the next new thing has popped up, or once a new trend has popped up, or like whatever has popped up, like it's going to fade away so quickly. Same happens with ads. I'm not saying ads are bad. Like I think there should be a combination of everything. But the thing is the thing with ads is as soon as you stop the campaign, like the relationship ends or the exposure ends. With the podcast, the exposure and the relationship continues. Now, the next question is, what should the tone be? What should the style be? Should we sound more professional? Should we sound more casual? Because sometimes some firms are like super strict in terms of how they want to be portrayed in their content. How do I keep that? How do I change that? This is something very personal. You need to talk to the stakeholders about that and see how they want to be portrayed. Because even if, for example, you're working with a law firm or with a firm that has like very strict or very, very, very formal looking executives or like a very formal looking host, what we want to have is also the human side of that person. I've said human like 10 times or 20 times in this episode, but we want to show people like they are not just the person in the suit. We want to show people like they are also a person who has gone through struggles, has gone through learnings, has learned life lessons, has learned a business lesson, has learned experience, has gotten life experiences, is what they are sharing with the audience. It's not just like the technical side of things, it's also like the experience side of things, and showing that person as a real human being with all like their features and the like the lights and the shadows is going to be very important. So in a nutshell, I will say like you can keep it casual up to a certain extent because you want to make it spontaneous and real. You want it to sound like a real conversation. You don't want it to sound like promotional video. Yes, one of those company videos where you show like, oh, these are the facilities and these are the benefits. You don't want it to sound like that. You want it to sound like a real conversation. Voices on the podcast, I just mentioned it doesn't have to be your CEO necessarily. It doesn't have to be a particular executive. It can be a person who has an ease to communicate and has a desire to communicate things. And you don't necessarily need to have a singular host. I mean, it is good to have a singular host to keep consistency, but you can have multiple co-hosts. Those co-hosts can be, or interviewees can be instructors. Yeah, because we're speaking educational platforms here, instructors or students or people who create content, educational designers, instructional designers is what I'm saying. So you can have all those people from within your company and within your industry on there. It doesn't have to be just one voice. It can be multiple voices. Even when I say voice, I am not speaking. Yeah, I am speaking about like the physical action of the voice, but I am also talking about the perspective side of the voice. It is good to have that because sometimes having opposing views or different views help you identify gaps inside your own practices, inside your own services. So keep that in mind. Yeah, that will also make you more credible. Echo chambers, everything looking perfect, everything looking nice. It worked up to some point with social media, but not anymore. How do we measure success with a podcast? And I know it is a cliche to say what you don't like what you can't measure, you can't improve, or you can't grow what you can't measure, something like that. You know what I'm talking about. But some things just can't be measured. Some of them can, very relevant ones can be measured and should be measured. Some of them can't. How can you measure podcast? Brand authority. How can you see that? Maybe you have easier access to conferences. You receive invitations to a congress. You receive invitations to participate as a guest on a different podcast show. Yes, people start looking for you to share what you do on other spaces. Maybe you're getting more speaking gigs. Maybe you get invited to a TV show, to a radio show. So that is a good way to know people are actually listening to us. They are getting value from this. And this is working. Yes, it's not instant money ROI, is like building up your authority. Also leads. This is very effective when it comes to B2B opportunities. Like you are going to get contacted by other companies that maybe need your services or individuals that need your services. Of course, that is a way to measure ROI. There are other aspects like how can you measure community, for example? How can you measure community building? How can you measure engagement before, like beyond the likes? Because like is just a person tapping on a phone. That's it. But what does it actually mean? So keep that in mind. And see, this is very depending on the audience. How can you measure community engagement here? Is it maybe because you offered a webinar through the podcast and a lot of people attended? Or is it maybe because you organized a live event, or maybe because you organized something and like you are getting the response, like that presence from people? That is also a way to measure that. Very tricky, I know. It changes depending on one, the industry, two, the type of company and offers you have, and three, on your own perspective, because we can have two different companies that have two very different perspectives on what they are building the podcast for. So it is up to your values and your objectives. Yeah. I cannot tell you there, like it is not a one size fits all thing. It is not a cookie cutter thing. It needs to be adapted to your own company's values. And then promotion, you got to promote, you got to make your voice heard, you got to make people get those links, get those episodes. And you can integrate your existing marketing strategies with the podcast, because the podcast is not, again, a podcast is a business asset. It is not a separate thing from your business. It is not a side project you have. It is part of your business. So whatever marketing strategies you have should integrate and have to integrate the podcast in order to make sure, like, yeah, these are our products. Yeah, these are our services. And yeah, this is the inspiration. And these are the conversations we have for you as well. So integrate it into the promotional strategy. And you can even promote if you have like on-site events or live events, like spaces where you meet other people, or even if you go to networking spaces. Those are great for promoting the show as well. Same as you will do with your services or products. It is no different from that. Good. This is a lot of information. These are all the elements you will need to take into account if you had a podcast. I know it's a long list, or it feels like a long list, but actually, this is something you build step by step. It is no different than building any other content channel, any other content strategy. And the good thing is, in the long run, in comparison with other content strategies, it is so much easier to do. It is so much easier, so much cheaper. I am personally not a fan of social media because you have to get on that treadmill and create a lot of content every day and be on top of whatever trend is on. Like if the trend disappears, so you have to get onto the next trend. And that is very, very demanding in terms of time and attention and resources. So I do think is a podcast, long form content podcast is way more effective for that. That is everything for today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. If you are planning to start a podcast show, if your company, if a person in your team, or if, I don't know, you lead a marketing team, or if you, for your own business, you would like to start a podcast show, you don't know where to start. What I just mentioned is like a lot of information. It's like stressful. It's over. It should not be like that. Like I'm telling you all the elements included, but a lot of that can and should be delegated. So if you need help to get started with your show, just let me know, because this is what I focus on. This is my area of expertise. And this is how I can contribute to making your voice heard, helping you set up, edit, publish, and run your podcast show, right? So drop me a line if you have any questions, talkingsilkworm.com/contact. And yeah, that's all for now. I'm going to go for a coffee. See you in the next one. Goodbye.